Hey friends out there, Rob here. Today I would like to share with you how to live stream with YoloBox products. I'm going to give you my best practices for the video as well as the stream settings. I already did a video on audio settings specific to YoloBox products, but today we're talking about video. So if you'd like to jump into that, let's do it now. Before we go any further, this is a tutorial, a best practices, a masterclass type of video. I don't care how you think about it, but if you don't know these topics, that's a warning sign that you're not ready to charge yet. Most places will cause you to have some kind of negligence should you charge money for a service and then not be able to provide it. Imagine showing up to a wedding and live streaming a wedding, not pressing record on your cameras because for some reason people think that that's not a thing you do anymore. You always record ABR, and then you can't stream because it's your first time using the product. Imagine that. Now whatever money that you had will have to be rendered back to the client, and they will likely sue you because you ruined their special day. My point here is to make you aware that just because you have a piece of technology, you're not done learning about it. And so that's what this video is here to help you with. Okay, a couple of caveats with that. If we talk about something, use the section down below. This is going to be a long, around 30-minute video. Skip around to the section that makes sense to you. And if you've got any kind of comments or questions, I'll try to answer some down in the comments below. Okay, that being said, let's jump. The very first thing that we're going to see is going to be how we're going to stream. Streaming in vertical mode or horizontal mode, vertical mode, and then monitor mode. These three are very different in terms of how you interact with the device because of the destination. The destination is called the Content Delivery Network. In this instance, that could be YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or in the case of your local monitor, if you're just monitoring to record, it could be whatever place you're going to deliver the content to, church, an organization. Let me share with you why you would use these different ones. The monitor mode, most people don't understand why that's even there. They recognize I could just use a screen recorder app or a screen recorder on my phone or something like that and everything would be fine. And that is true, you could use a screen recorder app, but what the monitor mode is going to give you is all of the ability of the baked-in switching and title generation and additional video sources to create a very produced, highly polished product for delivery on YoloBox directly. Think of it as your computer where you bring all of your sources into, except that computer is specifically designed for creating an end product. From your audio, from your video, from your photos, from your PDFs, all managed on one with switching, titles, and generation all on this device. That means that as you create that with all of the different camera inputs that you might use, you could very easily create something offline that is then published to an organization. This is great for corporate tutorials where they need training and things like that. YoloBox can give you a live produced piece of content that you don't have to go back to the office and finish editing. You can actually deliver to the client right away. Think about that in your workflow. Think about how much time that saves you. And obviously things will need to be done properly to go into that, such as setting up your cameras right, setting unity gain, getting the colors, contrast, lighting, all those things. But if you're going to take that time to live stream, you might as well take the time to have a piece of deliverable content that you can get paid for today and not have anything else to do for it. I call it a quick same-day edit, and it happens on YoloBox. You can even do that with your live stream weddings, but in the live stream category, right? Instead of doing it to deliver that hasn't been live streamed, you could actually do it live. As you're recording the wedding, you can do the live stream and then give them that recording as a same-day edit. Okay. Then we've got vertical streaming and we've got traditional horizontal. Vertical streaming is really becoming important for social media, specifically to online sales. So if you think about Facebook Marketplace, if you think about Twitch, TikTok, Twitter, things like that, in the vertical streaming orientation, and even for YouTube Shorts, but not so much for YouTube Shorts, any place that has live interactions for that kind of streaming gives you the ability to do online sales and presentation. So vertical streaming, other than just fun videos, gives you another way to be able to properly market your product. You can add a QR code to your vertical streaming that would link to a site where someone could buy something right away, and you could have like a vertical fashion show. I've used vertical streaming for places like Chloe's Boutique here in Virginia Beach, Virginia, in order to help them have an online sales that matches the fashion show that have purchased online tickets to or access to Maybe they weren't able to get there directly. And then that we've made a book, I've got one over here somewhere, that was sold prior to the package with the tickets that had the QR codes that linked to the product. So there were some pre-sales that could happen through the book. There were some day of sales that happened through the streaming app. And then there were some in-person sales. All those things go to maximizing the type of sales and things that you can do. Vertical streaming is a great way to show that type of content. And then you've got your traditional horizontal streaming, which is this one right over here. We're going to go ahead and enter that. As we do, we're going to come to our first pro tip. Notice it says update. Okay, so you may not know this, but I'm going to share this with you. Most content creators, most professionals don't update the minute an update comes out. Do you know how many times that I have had an update from Windows that has caused something in my graphics or whatever to break when using the Adobe Creative Cloud suite? Right, there's always, these things have to mesh together. So I never update immediately. Oh, you might be chuckling right now. You think to yourself, I will use Apple, I never have that problem. Sure, how many times does your iPhone, especially as of recent, the past 5 years, how many times do you get multiple iterations of iOS? iOS is notorious for sending out constant small bug fixes. It's specific to individual apps sometimes that kill a particular app. Look at Rumble, just to name one or two. These are the types of things that most content creating professionals don't do. We don't generally update day one. Now, the reason I tell you this is because I don't update YoloBox day one either. Just because there's an update that's available doesn't mean I jump right on it. So that's my first pro tip. Give it a couple of days or a week, especially if you've got a known working good configuration. Don't update right before you go to a gig. That's ridiculous. That's not even due diligence. That's not something that you would do as a professional, because there could be something about the update that knocks out a feature that you use that has an unintended consequence that the update didn't mean. This is not a YOLO live thing. So those of you that are clawing down in the comments, you don't know much if you think that updating on day one is something you do. It's just not something most people in a professional setting would do. Cavalier or machismo, I can do what I want. Yeah, go for it. And then see what happens. It's just not a best practice. So in this instance, I'm going to click cancel. Bingo. Now, that doesn't mean that I won't update. It just means I don't update when I'm within about a week of an event, a paid event or something like that. I just don't do it. And obviously I do update. So that's the first pro tip. The next one comes up here. Most people would look at this panel and then they'd see all the different tests. I've been doing a lot of testing, and as you can see, this one right here is the next one that we're going to jump into. But this pro tip actually comes from up here. Before we go anywhere else, we want to come over here and actually test our network. So we go to our network settings, and then we do our network speed test. Now, I'm going to let this play, but if you're not testing your network before you're live streaming, you're just playing wrong. You're just wrong. How would you know what you're supposed to be setting your settings if you didn't do a network test? And are you aware that your network speed doesn't stay the same throughout the live stream duration, that it's variable? Here we've got 530 megabits per second. And you might say, wow, that's fast. Yeah, but most of you would have read this as megabytes per second because you don't know that that small b means megabits. That's a tenfold difference in the amount of information being transmitted. This is really 530 megabytes, which is 53 megabytes or 530 megabits or 53,000 kilobits. Understanding those conversions, which is in this case, I'm just using a quick factor of 10 conversion, is important because that's how you're going to set YOLO Live devices in order to stream. In fact, if you streamed in anything other than your phone, which you probably didn't if you don't understand this, if you ever streamed using OBS, XSplit, vMix, something like that, you would already know this, but you don't know this, which is why I'm telling you. So don't get mad if you're streaming and screaming in the comments because YOLO Live's product or any live stream product didn't do what you wanted it to do because it wasn't as simple as just pulling out your iPhone on Facebook Live and clicking go live. It's not that simple. You have to set it up. So knowing that, we're still not at the information we need to know. The information we need to know is actually under this More Information tab right here. Notice how it dropped down? And you can see that my upload speed is actually 11 megabits, not megabytes, megabits per second, which is 11,000 kilobits. That's going to be important later when we talk about it. Knowing that is because that's how much bandwidth upload I have. Remember, we're not downloading, other than a few kilobits for data correction and stuff like that. We're actually uploading, so we need as much bandwidth going up as we can get. This continues to get even more difficult when you realize that Here in my house on my network, right, I could use 100% of this upload and probably be fine. You never really want to use 100% of your upload because other devices are going to use some, but I could because there's nothing else going on. However, if you were, let's say, at a beach doing a volleyball competition and live streaming that with a couple of cameras using one YoloBox device, no problem. If you were there and you did your first stream test, network test, and no one else was there other than the crew setting up, not even the competitors, you'd probably be okay if you were just streaming that part around 50, 60, 70% of the upload speed. What you will find is that as competitors show up and as the people arrive, as you go from that area now packed with 1,000 people, your little sliver of this 11 megabits goes down quite a bit. So you never ever stream at 100% of your upload rate. It makes no sense. It will kill your stream. It will bog down the device. That's not an issue with YoloBox when you start beginning to drop frames in that instance. That's an issue with your ability to transmit the data upload. That's your issue with the network, right? And you wouldn't know that unless you were here. So what do I use? I use between 25 and 50% of the available bandwidth upload. If I'm at a funeral and I'm outdoors, I might use, outdoors I'm using cellular usually. If I'm on cellular and I'm not bonded, I might use the more conservative estimate of about 25%, which would be 2,500 to 3,000 megabits or 2.5 to 3 mega, I'm getting myself. It'd be about 2,500 to 3,000 kilobits or 2.5 to 3 megabits per second upload. And we would need to use that later. And I'll show that to you. However, if I was inside a place and I had good LAN or I was nice bonded or something I was connected directly, I might use 50%, which would be about 5.5 to 6. Okay, now that we know that, let's jump back out here. In any event, we've got our packages right here, right? All of our streaming destinations, and we're gonna jump right into one. Now that we're here, I'm gonna go ahead and show you, we've got some more destinations, just so that you know. You need to know how you're gonna live stream. But in our video panel, our switching panel, we've got this camera which is connected, it's showing, right? And then we could come over here and now we've got this next big settings that we could do. We've got HDMI 1 through 4 that we can add. This is YoloBox Ultra. We've also got USB 1, 2, and USB-C. So we've got a total of 7 different physical inputs, plus a local video, as well as images and a live stream. This live stream is cool. If you don't know about it, this particular function will allow you to have multiple live streams going at the same time and then unite them in one live stream production. Let me give you the example. Let's say you're doing news setting or some kind of reporting or in a desk situation where you've got a desk that's doing a presentation and you have something else, some people somewhere else that are off camera on location somewhere doing something. With YoloBox, and it doesn't have to be YoloBox, but YoloBox makes this much more simple. With YoloBox, you can stream from both to your YouTube or wherever. In this case, we're going to talk about YouTube. If you have your main stream going, your second on-location stream can go. And if it's live on the same channel, if it's live on the same channel, you will see it here and you will be able to add it. So if we had 2 streams going, one that was public, the stream everyone's watching, I could have another camera crew somewhere else, not in the same area, broadcasting to YouTube in an unlisted format, right? That I would then be able to add this as a live stream source and bring it into my video. That's amazing, okay? Now, when you do that, because I know you're gonna ask, latency, yes, latency. When you manage your entire project on YoloBox, you often forget that you have multiple choices for latency, codecs, well not codecs, but all kinds of different things on your YouTube Studio. Go into YouTube Studio, look at your scheduled live stream, and then check the latency. You can have none, ultra fast, all that other stuff. The reason that that's important is because many people will say on any YoloBox streaming, but this is unique, not just unique to YoloBox, it's unique to all of them, you have to set latency. Latency is how quickly you push what you're actively doing live up to the network for people to watch. Generally, YouTube's about 30 seconds behind, right? So the reason that's important in this situation is because if you're adding a live stream source and you're both 30 seconds behind, then you're a minute behind in your conversation. Now, that doesn't matter once the conversation gets going, because as I begin to talk and the person begins to answer, that time between the talk and the answer gets shorter because our brains can process the difference and it begins to happen more in real time. But that's something you need to think about. So usually, like if you think about a news show, when you see the reporter, okay, Jenny, tell us what's happening down on the beach. And then it takes 3 or 4 seconds and Jenny starts to speak, good day, I'm Jenny down at the beach. That's latency. The difference is they're using a satellite truck with like a 50 megabyte upload speed, which is fast. Remember, we're megabits. And next thing you know, they've got much lower latency. In YouTube, you can actually turn latency down. That can degrade quality through the use of frame drops and stutters. Just something to know. Okay. Okay, so we've looked at how many different settings that we have, and I've just got that going right there. Let's actually first look at the settings we want for our upload. Okay. For that, we need to come over to our source settings. Scroll down at the bottom, all the way over to the right, and hit the gear icon right there. Now, you're going to see switching control, local video, player mode, all that other stuff. The first thing we want to do is come down here to encoding settings. So you see stream encoding settings right here. Okay. Earlier, we were talking about things like kilobits per second. We talked about this instance at my home office where I have 11 megabits per second upload. Well, that's actually 11,000 kilobits per second. So when we're looking at our stream rate, we see our bit rate right here is at 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, well, 10,000 kilobits per second, 10 megabits per second. We've hit the max that YoloBox allows us to stream at for YouTube, or just in general on YoloBox. If you were streaming from OBS or vMix, where you had a more direct connection, you might stream at a higher bit rate. That bit rate that you're going to stream at is also determined up here by your resolution. Notice we've got 4K, 2K, 1080p, 720, and 480. I'm currently in 1080. YouTube says 3,000 to 6,000 kilobits per second for 1080 is what you would want for 1080 60, closer to 6,000, 1080 30, closer to 3,000. If you didn't know about the different best practices that each streaming platform, each content delivery network has, then you should look up with a Google search that says something like, hey Google, how many kilobits do I need to stream for a YouTube video at 1080 30? And it will pop up with the Google stream settings. Do the same thing for, in any event, well, you can choose 4K, 24, 2.5, you can choose all those things. In this instance, remember, the resolution is going to be very important. The higher the data rate that you have throughput, the bigger the resolution can be. But in data-starved areas, you will need to make some considerations before you just make this choice all willy-nilly. 4K is not something I would stream at any location unless I was hardwired because it requires so much uplink. Now, you could be bonded. That's the first screen on the bottom tab. We'll talk about that in a minute. Generally, when I do a live stream, I like to be at 1080, and I like to be, personally, somewhere around 4,000 to 5,000 kilobits. I really prefer 1080 at 5,000 kilobits per second. If I can get 1080, 5,000 kilobits per second, I'm good. If I can get 1080, 4,000 kilobits, 3,000 kilobits per second, I'm okay. But if I'm having trouble there at that with my network test, I will drop down to 720 at 3,000. 720 at 3,000 or 3,200 kilobits per second will give you a better looking image than 1080 at 2,000 in my opinion. The reason's quite simple. More bit rate, more data, right? Although the resolution is smaller, the fidelity is generally higher. However, you won't know this unless you test out and see for yourself, and these things will change. So what I like to generally do is stream at 1080, and then as I'm streaming, if I have any kind of a problem or an issue, I will actually update that issue by changing my stream encoding rate right here. Now, because of this, I want to show you the next thing. We've got constant quality, variable bit rate, and CBR, okay? I'm going to come back over here to 1080 because I'm going to go 1080 and I'm going to do my max at 1,300 kilobits per second. And I'm going to stream and I'm going to show you what happens when you have a problem. I'm going to do 24 frames per second. I need to come over here now and select my destination. Robert Ham, I'm going to do unlisted, done. Now, once I click done, okay, we should be ready to go. I'm going to turn that on. unlisted, done. Okay, so it's thinking. Okay, now I'm going to click go live. Okay, and now while it's going live and figuring it out, I'm just going to get a glitch title and I'm going to put Robert Ham Photography over it. So now I've got a title on top of this video. Okay, so I want to show you a couple things, and this is important. Currently, we're streaming up here, 24 frames a second. We're at 6,300, 6,700 kilobits per second, or 6.7 megabits per second. Right now it's around 5. And down here on the bottom right, it shows that we're live to YouTube. Now, should I go ahead and change back to this particular stream, which is going right now, we're going to get some change in our upload and download rate, okay? As that changes, I might encounter problems. If I begin to encounter problems and my drop frame rate goes down, pro tip number three, if you start encountering a drop frame rate, the thing that you need to do is immediately pause your video. Pause, okay? Then come over here into your encoding settings and reduce the bit rate, okay? And then click go live. Bingo. That's your number one thing to do. Now, hear me out. What else are you going to do? You're unable to change the resolution, right? And you're experiencing dropped frames, right? So the problem is the amount of data that you're transmitting. So you can change two things. Well, actually, you can change three things. Over here, you can change your bitrate streaming quality from constant quality to variable bitrate to constant bitrate. And you can change your bitrate, and you can change your frame rate. You cannot change the resolution. So when you begin to experience problems, what's better? To have your stream completely crash, or to pause it for 30 seconds and then restart it so that it's fine for the rest of your video? You might say to yourself, well, geez, Rob, won't that show as a stutter on the recording that everybody's watching or on the live stream? And the answer is yes, it will show as a stutter. It will look as a one-frame stutter rather than the jerky, reduced, the ridiculous stuff that happens when your stream is bad. So the first thing that will drop out, in my experience, when your stream rate begins to chug out, right, is audio. Audio will begin to be no longer synced with the video. And when the audio isn't synced with the video, you've got problems. Here, we've got no audio coming with the video, okay? Well, why is that? Well, it's simple, because in the audio panel, the only audio that's on is the program panel. I haven't told it to use audio from HDMI 1. Check that out. Now that it's on, it's using audio from HDMI 1. Now, I've already spent a lot of time doing a video about audio for YoloBox. However, I'll spend this time to take it. There's a guy that posed a question recently and said, hey, we got an Ultra, we used it at our church day one, and the audio was great at the church, was great on the video, but when I checked the audio from another device, it was distorted, it was overmodulated. You know, I spent all this time looking online, I can't find any problems. Well, number one, no you didn't. The audio masterclass that I did, or the Get Started in Audio, is the #1 video pinned to the YoloBox forum. So all you had to do was watch it. Number two, if you had done any search, you would have found my videos that talk about audio for video, best practices. Any of those, they would have popped up on YouTube. Hundreds of thousands of views, right? They're there. So you didn't, the reality is, remember, no ego, you don't know what you're doing. And you don't even realize that there's different types of line outs. It's not YoloBox's fault that the audio came in overmodulated. The commenter said that what they had to do was turn the audio way down on the audio gain. And that reduced it so that it wasn't too loud and distorted, but at this point in time, it still could tell that the audio was bad. Yeah, no duh. Of course it was bad. It was bad because the board they were using, sending the line out, was at the wrong level. This is not a line in. This is a mic in. A mic in is a very sensitive input, okay? Which means it amplifies quite a bit more than a line level signal would, right? When the line in comes into here, it is so loud, it blasts the mic input. It blasts the DACs, the digital audio converters, right? The analog digital converters, right? It blasts them, okay? I'm also not sure that every time YoloBox calibrates this to a minus 12 decibel at the green to yellow square, which is right around here, the first one, I'm not sure that they're all perfectly calibrated, because unless you're buying professional audio equipment like Profesh, then you're not getting a properly calibrated input anyways. Which is why it's so important to check for unity gain. Checking for unity gain means that the level that is being sent from the device into your next device in your signal chain match. Okay, how do you make them match? Well, you make them match by, number one, testing, and then adjusting the input or output. And you do that starting from the previous spot in the signal chain. So in this instance, all the microphones were already set and they ran into the soundboard. Soundboard already had everything dialed up. It was great for the room environment for where everything was going. And then they plugged YoloBox into the sound deck, or the sound decks went into YoloBox in order to bring in the sound of YoloBox for transmit. But it worked great. I can hear them say already. It was perfect. It worked great for the other device that we had plugged in. Yes, if you plugged it into a camcorder or another desk or a live streaming desk, it most likely automatically defaulted because that device had the capability, or the person that used it last set it up properly for that device. When you plug in a new device into a new audio input, you have to restage the gain to unity for both of them. Meaning that the person did not do that, which is why there was a problem. But instead of recognizing that, they just think there's a problem with YoloBox. They have no idea how little they actually know. And in their comment, they even said, I'm tired of looking online. I've looked everywhere. No, you haven't, because if you did, you would have had the information. Don't be that guy. Remember the Karens I talked about earlier? That's no good to be. This is you gotta do your due diligence, guys. Here, the other thing that would have happened, and this is important to know, so if you're tired of watching this and you're like, Rob, he's just yelling at us and everything else, no, you have to understand, you need to know this, right? So if you can't find it anywhere else, I'm telling you now. The deck, the soundboard, may have a multiple user interface or multiple output, so it may be able to use that output. It may have a little switch or a dial or a knob that allows you to select that output from either a mic level or a line level or an instrument level, or most likely what I think was a speaker level. I think the guy got a speaker level output into YoloBox, which caused him to have to reduce the gain by 35, 36 decibels just to get it in the green, peaking in the green to yellow, which is really what you want for digital audio, peak in the green to yellow. You don't want it in the red. Okay. Now that we've done that, we've turned that on. We don't use audio follows video ever, right? And we can see we're still streaming, everything's fine. Let's go on to our next pro tip. As we look for all of our devices, notice that no matter what, I would have to deal with all of my audio from one device rather than three, or I'll restate that. Would you rather have to deal with audio from 4 devices or 5 devices or just one? You see, if you ask me, it's just one device. So in whatever instance that is, I would run my audio into one device, specifically a camera or a camcorder, maybe YoloBox. Generally speaking, if you don't have a camera connected to YoloBox, which I don't see how you would do, you could run directly into YoloBox using that mic input, just set the unity gain. Here's how I like to do it. Normally, there's a camera at back of house where this device would be, or the camera is beneath YoloBox. Which means if you have an XLR input because you have an XLR input, or if you have mic inputs because you have a splitter and multiple mics, you can mic up all of your talent or get your talent's voice, get their audio, and run them into the camera. Okay, in this instance, the camera that's getting all of the audio is HDMI 1. Because of that, if all of my audio is running into the camera, I can turn HDMI 1 on, I can turn audio follows video off, and none of my other inputs for cameras need to have audio on. That means that every time I switch the input, the audio will stay from the known good audio that is being mastered from all of my inputs. Now, how might that be? How could you get multiple sources? Well, in the example we used earlier, had the gentleman set the gain to unity properly and staged it right, then all of the audio inputs was coming from the sound deck, the soundboard, into YoloBox, which means no one has to monitor that other than the camera operator to make sure that the levels aren't peaking from the output to the input, because the sound guy's monitoring all the audio individually. Okay, let's say you're running and gunning and doing everything. Let's say you've got a panel of 4 people and you've got 2 wireless mics and you've got 2 regular mics. You might just use those wired mics into a Tascam, a Portacapture X8 or Zoom F6 or F5 in 1, 2, and plug that into one channel input, left channel input, and then your other 2 wireless mics get plugged into, as a set, into the right channel input. Now you've got 4 channels, audio, 1, 2, 3, 4 mics, coming into 2 channels for broadcast out. Now, when we're talking about live streaming, you don't need stereo. This is pro tip number 4. You don't need stereo. You don't need stereo. You don't need stereo. Stop asking for stereo. Why? Okay. What do you think is easier for someone to hear? Dual mono in left and right ear, or a stereo pan of left panned, right panned in your ear of someone doing spoken word? If you said stereo, you are wrong. It's easier for us to hear the mono, dual mono. We're going to get the same thing in each ear. That's going to give you so much more opportunity to do additional sound, to use additional microphones in your sound, because you're sending everything to both ears, especially on a cell phone. If you expect your content to be watched on a cell phone, then the reality is, no, that church gospel that they're singing, hallelujah, good Lord, you don't need to pan that stereo, because then the minute someone goes to another mic that you weren't expecting, then you can't hear them anymore, right? No, dual mono, left and right mono. Now, let's move on to my pro tip number 5, latency. The reason I say to move your audio into a camera input is because the camera generally, on most professional gear, and even semi-professional, like if you're spending $1,000 or more on a device, you probably are going to have a good audio clock, which means that if you sync everything up with the audio and the video in your camera, you will have very little use for the delay audio, right? If your video and audio are out of sync, YoloLive does give the opportunity to synchronize them using a delay. I find I use this mainly when I'm running audio directly into YoloBox, and I've got cameras or audio sources that I'm using a different bit rate, and well, bit rate doesn't matter as much. I'm using a different sample rate. So if I'm using 16-bit 24, if I'm using 16-bit 41K sample rate audio on one camcorder, and on another one I'm using 48K 24-bit, and then on my recorder I'm using 96K 32-bit, but I'm outputting it 24-bit, those are all different sample rates and all different bit rates. The bit rates don't matter as much for YoloBox, but they do require a bit of processing. The bits have more weight, they're bigger files, they're transmitting more information. So that does add some processing time, but what does the biggest difference in my experience is the sample rate not being the same. 96 to 48 to 41 kilohertz sample rates are all different, and then YoloBox has to combine all of them. Well, that's great, but if you do that in your camera, then you will have your camera clock combining everything and doing half of the work and sending that to YoloBox already synced, or generally speaking synced. I use Panasonic and Sony gear. I've never had a problem this way. When I do use my external audio input, like my Tascam, because I'm doing on my Rodecaster and I'm doing a podcaster and I'm running the Rodecaster Pro directly into YoloBox, then I will sometimes have to adjust the sync rate with the audio. I generally avoid all of that by controlling all of my levels on the Rodecaster Pro or the L8 by Zoom or the Portacapture or whatever device I'm using. You can control all your inputs and just run it into one device. That will get it for you easier. Man, we've talked about a lot of things today. Most important that we've talked about have really been over here. I'm going to bring up over here in the encoding. I'm going to bring up one final thing, and that is in your network bonding. Okay? With your network bonding, you've got the ability to use multiple sources for your internet connection. This is extremely important, but many people just don't understand how it works. YoloBox products, YoloLive products, all the YoloBox have the ability to have a SIM card put in it, And then if you've got the right carrier, AT&T and T-Mobile here in the United States, you can actually pick up that 4G or 5G signal and then use that as a tablet interface for your upload. That's very, very important, okay? Because we're doing all of that, we then have the ability to use an exterior, right, source of internet, such as a Wi-Fi connection to our cell phone hotspot. Or we could use a dongle connection to a USB hotspot. We could use any of those, or we could use an Ethernet connection, or we could use the USB-C port. All of those connections without bonding will only work one at a time. When you purchase a bonding program from YoloBox or YoloLive, or through another device that allows it, right? But you won't be able to use it on this interface, you'd use it on that device. At those times, you've got the ability to use multiple sources of internet at the same time. What this does is they work together to send data so that you can have a better, more reliable connection and a higher throughput. If you find that you're in data-starved networks, bonding is a great way to get your signal out there and stream on location. But there are other alternatives. If you don't have that plan for bonding, the best thing that you can do is reduce your resolution that we've talked about over here, as well as your bit rate. So we've got a resolution and we've got our bit rate. Notice you can't change your resolution once you begin streaming, right? But you can change your bit rate. You just need to pause. Those things right there will help you quite a bit. So, guys, I'm Rob. I hope that you have found this helpful. It's been a long video, but if you made it through, you're already more than 80% of the way there to knowing what you're supposed to do when you encounter issues at live stream time. If I can help you in any way, leave some comments down below. I want to thank you for watching and remind you I will catch you all on the flip side. Bye for now.